So I'm based in the finance team of Statoil. I'll come back to the company in a minute. So that's where I have my education and background. But some of you know that I've also worked in HR, heading up an HR function. And I've also been in different leadership roles for more than 20 years. And as you know, all of this is highly relevant because beyond budgeting is about so much more than budgets. So there's a big doses of people and leadership into this. My beyond budgeting journey started back in 1995. Then I was working in a company called Borealis, where we had the opportunity to kick out the budget before there was anything called beyond budgeting. We hadn't heard about any other organization doing this. It was simply a big jump into the darkness, but it worked, and I've never looked back. When I joined Statoil in 1983, it was a smaller company than what it is today. And most small companies, they want to grow, they want to become bigger. Fair enough, and some succeed. But many of those who succeed, they discover that we have not only become big, we have also become slow, bureaucratic, rigid. We've lost a lot of that agility and flexibility we had as a smaller organization. And I think there's a wonderful kind of parallel here to the aging process of man, because as we grow older, we do lose a bit of that agility we had as teenagers. I'm approaching 60, I'm starting to get some personal experience here, and what I've learned is that when it comes to man, there is no kind of choice. You know, in the end, age takes us all. Organizations, however, they have a choice. It is written nowhere, as far as I've read, that because you are big, you should be slow, rigid, bureaucratic, all the stuff that we don't want to be. So, looking back at our journey, I think it has very much been about trying to find our way back to what we had as a smaller organization without losing the benefits of being big. So how can we be small and big at the same time? Is maybe our big question, has been our big question. And the big question for organizations who not yet have become big, but want to become big, that should be how can we grow without ending up in the same place. What I would like to share with you today is who we are, how we work, and what we've learned at Statoil. Statoil was born in 1972 when there was oil and gas discovered in Norway. And we had to hit the ground running to catch up with the Exxons and the BPs and the other big guys. So delegation, trust, decentralization, that was kind of, it was not a choice we made, it was a necessity. We simply had to give young people big responsibilities at very young age. I joined the company in 1983. My first management job in 1984 was head of the corporate budget department. So I've been heading up more budget processes than I want to be reminded about. And trust me, I've done so many stupid things in my life. It's unbelievable. We have a new CEO, great CEO, who has, I wouldn't say changed our strategy, but kind of sharpened, distilled our strategy. And here are the headlines, our ambitions: shaping the future of energy. Competitive at all times, yes, that has something to do with the oil price. But even more importantly, we want to play a key role in transforming this industry. And we want to provide energy for a low carbon future. We definitely recognize climate change. We think we are part of the problem. We think we can also be part of the solution on our way to a low carbon future. Our new CEO has also updated our leadership principles. We used to have 12, which is quite a lot. Now we have 3. It's about shaping the future. It's about empowering people. It talks a lot about empowering. And it is about delivering results. It's about performance defined in the right way. And that's the only reason why we embarked on this journey in Statoil, because we think and believe and know that this is good for performance defined in the right way. And I would like to explore that important word performance now for a few minutes in a somewhat different setting than business and organizations, because we are going to move into traffic for a few minutes. Because in traffic, we would also like to experience good performance when we are driving to work or to the airport or whatever. And what would we like to experience in traffic? What's our definition of good performance in traffic? Flow, right? A good flow and a safe flow. Absolutely. I hate traffic jams. By the way, I never understood why they call it rush traffic. There's no rush at all, right? Those cars are standing dead still. But there's a lot of things I don't understand, as you will learn. So, anyway, traffic authorities, they want exactly the same, even if I have my doubts from time to time. And here is something we often find put up by traffic authorities to create a safe and good flow. 2 questions around this way of managing traffic. Who is in control and based on which information? So who is in control here? Travel authorities? Yeah, absolutely. Traffic authorities? Absolutely. The guy who programmed this light, right? That's the one who is in charge here. And which information would this programming be based on? Historic, right? Some historical trends, maybe some forecast about how traffic might develop. Would this be entirely fresh information as you're standing there waiting for the, or as you're waiting for the green light? Obviously not. And the guy who is managing, where would that person be?
At home.
At home, yeah. In bed if you're driving at night, in the office. Yeah, right. But not in the situation, and information not completely fresh. But again, the best of intentions to try to create a safe and good flow. Is there an alternative to the traffic light? Exactly the same purpose, but very different solution.
Roundabout.
Roundabout. There's a lot of simple leading questions in my session today. Same questions here. Who is in control and based on which information? So who's in control? Drivers. We are, as drivers. Based on which information? What you see. Fresh, real-time, here and now information. So very different answers on these 2 different ways of managing traffic. So let's compare the 2. Which of these 2 is normally most efficient? The roundabout. Why is the roundabout more efficient? It's more effective. Why is it more effective? In real time, that's definitely one part of it. But you could argue that you have access to real-time information when you are standing in front of that light, waiting for the green light. You can see what's happening. But what is it that you don't have in front of that light that you have in the roundabout? Freedom, yeah? Freedom to make decisions. You have the authority to make decisions. You don't have that in front of that light. That's maybe what makes the big difference here. Which is most difficult to drive in? Another leading question. Of course, the roundabout. And again, back to our organization for a minute. Everything we are trying to leave behind in Statoil of traditional management is, from a leadership point of view, much easier than what we now are trying to do instead. Right? Our new processes are simpler, but the leadership they take is more challenging. But leadership is not meant to be easy. Is it relevant to talk about values in this setting of traffic? In the Statoil book, we talk a lot about values-based management. And the opposite of values-based management, you could call rules-based management. The traffic light is a good example of rules-based management. In case you've forgotten, red is stop, green is drive. We can always discuss yellow. But it is a very simple rules-based system. And if there's a value set among drivers waiting for that green light, which is about me first, I don't care about the rest, that mindset is normally not a big problem in front of the light because it's overruled by red light. But in the roundabout, me first, I don't care about the rest, can actually be a big problem. Because in the roundabout, we are much more dependent on having this common positive purpose of wanting this to flow well, right? Here we have to help each other. We have to make our own intentions visible. We have to interpret other people's intentions, right? So it's not enough with fresh information authority to act on it. We also need this positive values set. Trust is a relevant word here. Ahead of the light, we are not trusted. In the roundabout, we are trusted by traffic authorities to make decisions. Transparency is an important word. Ahead of that light, in theory, the only thing you need to be able to see is the color of the light, nothing else. In the roundabout, that would be a disaster. You have, in the roundabout, you need to see, be able to see what's happening. Transparency is very important. The label performance management, which I actually have in my title, is an awful title, awful words. But it's highly applicable for the traffic light. That's exactly what traffic authorities are doing. They are managing performance. In the roundabout, they are however, doing something different. The roundabout is not about managing performance. It is about creating conditions for great performance to take place. It's about enabling performance. And that is a very principal difference. And I would argue that performance management is one of these illusions of control that many finance and HR people live under. If we don't manage performance, there will be no performance. That is not true. But it's not bad news because there's so much great stuff we can do when it comes to enabling performance. The roundabout is also a more self-regulating system. And I think that's a common thread through the beyond budgeting principles also. It's very much about self-regulation. And you saw these principles earlier. I will not go through them now, but I put them up here because some people seeing this, especially for the first time, they might feel that this is pretty big stuff. Actually a bit scary, right? I know a number of finance people who are a bit cold on this. They think it's scary. Not necessarily the management process side, but the leadership side of this, right? If that's the case, then we need to relate to that, because if we scare people, we risk not getting started at all. So then we need to find other, more safe, more comfortable places to start so that we don't scare people. And therefore, I want to bring up again the budget problem list that Anders was showing a bit earlier, because this is about equipping you with arguments for why this process is flawed, without kind of addressing the full Monty and all the principles from day one. It is a more kind of stepwise approach in case these principles are too scary from day one. This should be plan B. Plan A should always be to try to get people to kind of engage on the totality. But if that isn't the case, I mean, there are other ways of doing it. And again, that budget problem list is long, often weak links to strategies, very time-consuming. Many people talk about time-consuming as a big problem. It does belong on the list, but if you look at some of these other problems, they are actually bigger. Assumptions quickly outed, stimulates unethical behaviors, the lowballing, the gaming, that's the big problem. Creates illusions of control, that's a big problem. Decisions, forcing us to make decisions too early, in the autumn the year before, very often too high up in the organization, that's the problem. It can prevent us from doing stuff that we should have done, but we can't do it because it's not in the budget. And the other way around, it can lead us to do things that we shouldn't have done because it is in the budget. And you already know the game, spend it or lose it. This is about the stupidity of the accordion time horizon where we have when we kind of make budgets and forecast. When we make budgets, we want to understand 12 months ahead into the budget year. Suddenly 9 months ahead is enough. We can still see till year end, 6 months, 3 months before we suddenly get interested in 12 months again. It's maybe not the biggest problem, but at least a bit funny. This is a big problem. The budget is a very bad platform or yardstick for defining describing good performance. Hitting the budget number, describing that as good performance is a very narrow, mechanical, and sometimes a completely outdated problem. And last but not least, here is a problem that we have briefly discussed already, the conflicting purposes, but I'm coming back to that because addressing the conflicting purposes in a budget can be a great place to get started if the big thing is too big. And it is back to the different purposes of a budget. Think about a budget here in financial terms, the financial budget. And if you look at the different parts of it, then we see that there are 3 different purposes at play here at the same time. When we make revenue budgets, that is at the same time as it can be a target, right? The sales that we should hit. It's also a kind of forecast of what might come in of money next year. If you take fixed cost, it's actually maybe all three things, right? It is a resource allocation, it is a forecast of what we think the cost will be, and in some cases also a target. So you got this very confusing picture of 3 different purposes at play in the budget at the same time. And again, just to remind us, what's the problem around this financial Kinder egg, trying to be very efficient. 3 things in one process, one number. Well, let's take an example again. Let's assume that the forecasting is important to us. It's important to understand financial capacity, cash flows next year. We start on the revenue side. We ask our salespeople, what is your best sales forecast for next year? But every sales responsible know that the number I now give up will come back to me as a sales target for next year. And there is a sales bonus linked to hitting my sales target. So what might happen to that potentially good sales forecast we could have received? Right? It might start to move this way, right? And we all know the game. But you know, it's budget time, we are busy, we have to move to the cost side, the investment side. We ask the same people, what's your best cost or investment forecast for next year? Because we need to understand cash flows. But everybody knows that this is my only shot at getting access to resources for next year. And last year, the guys upstairs, they cut my number with 30%. So what behavior might we now see? The very opposite, right? Inflated numbers. You all know the game, you all smile, but this is not a smiling matter. This is actually quite sad and serious, because not only does this destroy the quality of our numbers, right? It also stimulates this behavior that is at least borderline unethical. So that's the bad news. The good news is, as you know, that we can still do all of these 3 things, but in 3 separate processes, because these are separate things. A target is what we want to happen, a forecast is what we think will happen, resource allocation is about what it takes to make it happen. How do we optimize scarce resources? This can become different numbers, and even done in different ways, because when we separate, we can start to improve each of these purposes. How can we set targets that really inspire and stretch people without people feeling stretched, that are more robust against the VUCA out there, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity? Some organizations, they find out that we don't need all these targets, right? They find out we can do with less targets. Some organizations find out we don't need targets at all, that there are more downside than anything else by setting targets. They find other ways of creating direction, inspiration. They find other ways of evaluating performance. They say we don't need to predefine performance through a target in order to be able to evaluate performance. How can we establish a lean, simple, unbiased forecasting process where we quickly get on the table a set of numbers that we know we can trust? Because we have removed the reason for gaming the numbers. The forecast is no longer a bid into a target negotiation. This is no longer an application for money. It's just a forecast and nothing else. And last but not least, how can we manage costs in different ways than what the traditional annual budget provides? Because we need more effective, intelligent ways of managing cost than what the management technology invented 100 years ago are able to offer us. Let's not forget that budgeting is a 100-year-old management technology. And how can we do all of this more event-driven? So this is where we started out in Statoil, and actually in Borealis as well. It's logic, shouldn't be scary, but it is a great way to get started as a kind of nice backdoor into the bigger beyond budgeting principles. Because once you're into these discussions, then you can have great discussions about how can we do things better now, inspired by new business realities out there and inspired by a positive view on employees, theory X versus theory Y. So let me give you a few examples from Statoil of what this could look like. These are our most important financial targets in the company. The 2 KPIs here are definitely, they definitely have their weaknesses, but that is not the point. The point is that we are thinking in relative terms, right? On return on capital, there's no target of 11.5, whatever. It's all about doing well against competition. These are the guys we compete with. We are all not identical, so this is not as precise as setting 12.5, but it's 10 times more relevant. And we call these evergreen targets, right? We've had them, or ambitions or whatever. We've had the same ones for maybe 10 years now. I think we've moved the right one on the right side up and down a few times, but we don't need a big exercise every autumn to kind of recalculate this. They stand until we have some other ones. This is probably the closest our board comes to approving a budget. And these 2 drives the common bonus scheme we have in Statoil. Everybody on board, us against the competition. We do also have some individual bonuses. I'll come back to those.